Chris?
I can hear you. Yes.
It's early in the morning there. We woke you up.
It is. Well, there was a big rainstorm last night and it knocked down some tree branches. That was the challenge.
Uh-huh. And what time is there?
It's 8 in the morning, 10 after 8.
8 in the morning. Perfect. My name is George. I am an associate in Osteostrong, Greece. I'm very glad to speak with you finally.
Yeah.
There are a lot of questions for you, and people in Greece are watching the things you've done, and they are very, how can I say, they can't believe
Sure.
all these things. So, you know, can I start my questions now? My first question.
You also need to start a video for John Jaquish. John, if you can turn on your video, please.
I have no control over that in this call.
Oh, one moment, I can.
I think it's up to you guys.
One moment. Where is it? Okay. I think now you can turn on your video.
Now I can do it. There we go.
Okay, perfect. So people now can believe us that it's really you. So, okay. My first question is, how did you first start getting involved with biohacks, especially with Osteostrong? You see,
well,
people hearing
I invented the technology, so I came before Osteostrong did. But yeah, it was because of my mother. My mother was diagnosed with osteoporosis, and she read about the side effects of the medications she was prescribed, and she didn't want to take them. And I think there's a lot of people who are now aware of, or more aware of, some side effects of medications, and they just decide, I'm going to see if there's another way. And so what I said to her is, there isn't another way right now, but maybe I can figure one out. So I began studying different bodies of literature. What I thought was, if I could find a group of people who has very high bone density, like superhuman bone density, how did they do it? How did they build it? And then, is there a way I can look at how they built it so that I can deliver that in some way to my mother so she can benefit from that understanding? And that was obvious. The people who had the highest bone density in the world were gymnasts. And it was because of the contact, the way they would hit the ground with such incredible force. It was far beyond what we could do with resistance training. Most people never even go past 2 times their body weight when training their legs, when they do resistance training. But now we know there's been more research since my first version that it's 4.2 multiples of body weight that is the minimum to trigger growth in the hip. Well, most people don't exercise with 2 multiples, and 4.2 is the minimum. Are they getting anything out of it? No, they're not. Are they getting anything out of walking? I hear women all the time say, I walk every day for my osteoporosis. Well, you can walk every day, and that's good for you. It's circulation. There's a lot of benefits to that, but you're not doing anything for your bone density, because there's a minimum dose response. And so it's sort of like aspirin. You know, aspirin is good for headaches. Well, 5 milligrams or 5,000. Well, 5 milligrams won't do anything, and 5,000 will kill you. But 350 milligrams is just right, and that'll take care of that'll relieve your pain. So it was just a matter of looking at the appropriate force and how to get to the appropriate force by emulating high impact. So that's how I got into bone density treatment.
And how did you ever thought of figuring out the right position that permits the bones to abstract that kind of force? And how did you have any past from perhaps weightlifting yourself? I don't know. Because it's a combination of knowledge. It's the knowledge of the Wolff's law, but you have to adjust the law to the practice.
Yeah, to the application. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No, weightlifting. My knowledge of weightlifting actually added confusion because actually I don't want to say this is the science of weightlifting doesn't have much science in it at all. So there's some great studies, but those don't translate into the general understanding of weightlifting. So I think sort of as an industry and as a practice, it's a really poor thing to follow. What I looked at was how people get the highest forces through the body, and it's high impact. So what positions do we naturally choose when we trip and fall, or when we have to jump and land? So it's where the body is going to be abruptly stopped. How do we, so like in the upper body, for example, if I'm falling, I want my arms like this. Like I want a 120-degree angle from upper to lower arm right here. I want the back of the hand in line with the clavicle. And that is how I can either produce or absorb the most force. So I identified 4 positions where we naturally absorb high impact forces. And that's how it all started. And that's how I prototyped the machines.
Yes, and that 4 machines are the spectrum of Osteostrong. And
Right.
Did you first start experimenting yourself, the method?
Yeah, I had to go first.
Yes.
Nobody would go after. I mean, nobody would go before me. Like, I don't know, if he does it, I guess I'll give it a try, sort of thing. Because, yeah, like in the beginning, it was just friends and family that were doing it.
Yes.
So,
how many years ago was that?
Say it again.
How many years ago is that?
13.
13 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And you keep doing, all friends and family are doing this for 13 years now?
Yeah. Yeah, they are.
Perhaps this is an explanation for a question I have for you later, the combination of this method with the X3 and the results you can do, because we all know that the bones and the muscles are together in this, and the better bones you have, the better muscles you can have.
Right.
But the first question I have to ask you before we go to that point is about doctors and about the medicine society and how they respond to this method. We face, the doctors here in Greece are a bit suspicious. They don't really change their minds easily. They are not very open-minded. Is the same thing in USA?
Not really. Well, yes, and like you have to look at not winning over one physician. You have to look at, because there will be some that are just unwilling to read what you give them, and they just say no. Because a physician, like, their time, this is true just about anywhere in the world, they are paid to see their patients. They are not being paid when they're not seeing their patients. So they don't have a lot of time. And so, like, and this is every country I've been to has been like this. So they don't have like they have requirements by their medical boards in their countries to have continuing education, but you go to those continuing education conferences and most people are more excited about playing golf or going to the swimming pool with their kids than they are the educational courses. And that's just kind of the way it's ended up being. When you go to continuing education, they're at like resorts and stuff, those conferences. So, or they're in Vegas, and you know the kids want to go on the roller coaster, and so that becomes a distraction. And they're not learning like they did when they were learning in school. Mm-hmm. So that's a little challenging. But if you get a physician that is interested in learning about a non-pharmaceutical alternative, and honestly, ethically, every physician should want a non-drug alternative for just about anything if it's possible, because the chances of something, a complication with something that's where the body's gonna fix itself, a physical medicine approach, I would say it's almost unethical to not pay attention to a physical medicine approach other than just their time. So instead of trying to focus on one physician who might be skeptical, just move on to the next one. And then when you get a couple of physicians to adopt this, then the physicians talk to each other. So you don't need to get them all. You don't even need to get a percentage of them. You really just need one or two. And then they'll explain it to each other because they trust each other very much. So it's just a matter of the open-minded one who has time to listen or who just thinks what you have to say is compelling. I noticed that I do much better talking to postmenopausal physicians because they're thinking about their own. I mean, nothing against men here. I mean, you know, I am one, so can't think they're that bad. But yeah, it's when you're personally invested in a problem, you just listen at a different level. Yes. And so, yeah, the more open-minded ones, because like a male physician might read some of the side effects of a bisphosphonate drug or a bone anabolic drug and go, oh, okay, yeah, I mean, if you're weak bones, what choice do you have? Whereas the postmenopausal physician will read the same side effects and say, I never want to take this. Like, this looks terrible. And so they listen.
Can I ask you, is it personal to ask you what's the condition, what's your bone density, or what happened to your mother after starting and using this method?
My mother appears in some of my videos still. She's doing great. She still has the bones of a 30-year-old. Her T-score is almost 0. Mm-hmm. And she's in her mid-80s. So she's very healthy. She still does gardening, a little bit of hiking. She dropped the tennis. She used to play tennis. No more tennis. But,
above all, having people around you who are living proof of the method and its bone density scores and all that is the biggest truth of all, I think. Yeah. And I should ask you now, what's the, how in USA, since the method is older there, what Osteostrong means for the US community at the moment? Is it something very common? Is it something very popular? Is it the obvious solution to bone density? It's becoming...
Where you are. So in certain places, like where there is an Osteostrong and it's been there, let's say a year, mm-hmm. then it's known because people go there and they reverse their osteoporosis and then they tell all their friends. So yeah, like Albuquerque, New Mexico, or Los Angeles. Also, certain areas are more, the people are much more active outdoors and they might be a little less inclined to take a medication and more inclined to look at sunlight and you know, the temperature that they live at, or different approaches that don't involve ingesting a chemical that's not found in nature. So in like California, all of California is like that. So I live in California.
Yeah. One question that we have in chat from Christina is the method suitable for people with inflamed joints like rheumatoid arthritis?
It can be. We've also heard that people have been able to reduce some inflammation, mostly because of the blood flow they're getting into the joints, because there's a lot of compression in the joints. But, you know, it's a case-by-case basis. It depends on how much that, like, you need to have a low enough threshold for pain where you can engage the body, and then the body can add more blood flow. But if it's, you know, just painful to do that, then it might not be so helpful. So it's really an individual by individual basis. You know, and I'd like to add, Osteostrong is not for everybody. Like, it's not like everyone on earth is going to benefit from this. You need to be relatively ambulatory, meaning able to move around in a relatively pain-free manner, because pain stops your movement. It's a process called neural inhibition. The more pain you have, the more muscles start to shut off. So I think it's important to point out that it's for those who can really voluntarily engage their body, and they'll get great results. But, you know, for the other people, then there's other options. The other options aren't great, but you know, someone who's in a wheelchair, or like even like quadriplegic or something, the whole concept is based on voluntary force. If you can't produce any voluntary force, well, you got to look somewhere else.
We can also reverse that, because perhaps someone who is willing to feel the pain, to pay the price in a way, you know, instead of someone who is totally healthy but isn't doesn't want to.
It works like any physiotherapy solution, or exercise solution. I don't like calling it like that, because it doesn't feel like an exercise at all. But we have, you have to put a maximum effort into it. You have to try your hardest. And you're right. There are some people who don't really want to put any effort in at all, and they get nothing. We get no results.
Let's talk some more about you. Were you a gym freak or something like that before Osteostrong?
No.
How did you see, after Osteostrong, you invented X3 also. What was the journey that led you from Osteostrong to X3 and becoming what you are today, which is very, very, you know, I don't know, it's fantastic. The results are very incredible.
Yeah.
Allow me to say.
I'm in very good shape. So I always thought, like, so I played rugby in university, and so I was athletic, and I enjoyed that very much, but I didn't really see a big physical difference between myself and the other players, and I really didn't like our weightlifting protocol. It was just nonsense to me, because I'd ask, like, what's the science? And somebody would hand me a study, and I would say, this study doesn't say anything. Like, I know how to read a study, and this just says, like, exercise is good for you. That's basically the conclusion. Like, okay, I knew that already. So there's not, now, I mean, I'm not putting down the field of sports science. There's a lot of brilliant things that have been discovered, but again, they don't necessarily get applied or even have an application for the day-to-day exercise protocol. So I didn't really pay much attention to the fitness industry, but I kept on doing whatever I had judged was the best of what we had, which was poor. And I think just understanding of muscle physiology is just so unfortunately bad. And the efforts, what drives the fitness industry the most is equipment sales. So when somebody makes a piece of equipment to do a certain thing, then you're told that that certain thing is important, right? So, you know, why is it that food companies fund research that say veganism is great? Well, it's because food companies know that vegans don't eat vegetables. They eat cookies and candy bars and cakes. And so they make all these like, you know, vegan, whatever, cookies and candy bars and cakes. And so it's for sales. So like you got to keep those financial interests in mind. And I just saw weightlifting is, and even like fitness magazines were just designed to sell like protein powder. Like I just thought, like, I'm not even gonna bother to read this. I know why this magazine exists. It's so it can hold the ads. Right. So like when developing Osteostrong, and especially doing the research, which was done at the University of East London, I was done through University of East London at a local hospital facility. And so we were looking at all the data that was coming in, and the postmenopausal women that were in the study, they were producing more force, granted in a very limited range of motion, than most of the strongest people in the world could ever use in a weightlifting environment. So I thought, wow, people are so much stronger in this impact ready range. So what I mean is right here, I am 7 times stronger than I am right here. So now that I knew that, now that I had proof of that, I thought, wow, weightlifting is not very good. Like, it's not a great way to stimulate the body, and probably also explains why so many people exercise their whole lives and they really don't look any different than the people who don't exercise. And as I see that every day, like in fact, I think the reason people make such a big deal out of my physique is because they see it as almost impossible to attain. That's not how I see it at all. My workout is 10 minutes a day. I eat 1 meal a day. So like meal prep is not like the thing that, you know, runs my life like most fit people. And so then I wrote the book, Weightlifting is a Waste of Time. You know, like, so, and that's me. And I did that to show what can be done based on a much better understanding of muscle physiology. Now, I won't say it's easy. Like, it's still exercise. You still have to try hard, just like Osteostrong. But it's convenient. It's quick. Like, you don't need to work out for any longer than 10 or 15 minutes a day. And my workout's a little longer because the larger a muscle becomes, the more oxygen is needed. So I'm like out of breath between exercises. But still, that's nothing.
Yes, I think that the biggest thing here is loyalty and the belief. You have to believe in this, and you have to be loyal.
You gotta commit, right?
Yes.
Like, if you're committed and you do it right for 6 months, then you'll see tremendous results. Yeah, I see people are impatient. There's an advertisement that was run in the United States. I don't know if international audiences would get this, but there was a really overweight man, and he's in a gym. The gym is empty, and he weighs himself, and he shakes his head because he's a big guy. And so he gets off the scale and he starts running around the gym, and he's really slow because he's really obese. And so he's running, but he's running as fast as he can, which is still slow. So he gets right back to where the camera stays in the same place at all times. It's right by the scale. So he gets back on the scale and he weighs himself again, like expecting to have lost weight by running around the gym one time. So people have some strange expectations. It's like they try something one time and they're like, well, what were my results? Yeah, that's not how it works. You gotta do something for a couple months. And it amazes me, but people don't actually know that. So a little bit of it is shaping the expectations. And what I say is, how long did it take you to become obese? Years. So why would you expect it to go away in a day? It's going to take you years to get that body fat off you. Yeah.
Yes. Do you think the results that we see in you, because here in Greece, in our effort to make the methods and the spectrum known and the X3 known, we use your image, we use your books, we use your research and all that, and everybody's suspicious because it's what you've said before. They don't believe that you can do that only by Osteostrong and X3. So I have to ask you the benefits of the combination of the methods of these two biohacks, and if you use any other biohacks, what do you do in terms of nutrition? I know this is a favorite question.
Yeah. I have very high protein, kind of medium to low fat diet, and basically zero carbohydrates. Like there is a way to use carbohydrates to increase blood flow into the muscle, which is a very advanced protocol. I don't recommend anybody messing with that until they've already got their Osteostrong and X3 exercise protocols completely integrated in their life, and they're doing all of the movements correctly. Now, it's much easier to do Osteostrong correctly because you have somebody right next to you coaching you through it. X3, you have to learn a little bit about how to use it. You got to watch the exercise videos. So, but basically all I eat is meat. That's it. And I eat one meal a day.
So you do fasting?
Yeah, every day. So just
24 hours. Since you eat once a day, it's 24 hours fasting. Is it right?
Right, and then once a week, I'll do a 72-hour fast. So I really only eat like 5 meals a week. So like I'll have a meal Sunday evening, and then I won't eat again until Wednesday evening. So nothing Monday, nothing Tuesday, and then back to 1 meal a day for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
How many calories a meal?
Kind of right at basal metabolic rate for me. Basal metabolic rate plus activity, which is like 3,300. Mm-hmm. So I weigh 240 pounds, or what is that? Like 113 kilos. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Have you tried other nutrition protocols before using this one? Have you ever been vegan, keto? I don't know.
I tried veganism for a month just because I wanted to say I tried it. Mm-hmm. But veganism is going to go down in history right alongside bulimia and anorexia. It's just like, bulimics and anorexics think they're healthy. They're dying, but they think they're healthy. And I think it's more of like the people are just misled into believing that's good for them. Like it's not. There's the diet is full of oxalates, which are slowly poisoning you, especially when you eat in mass the vegetables, and you have to eat processed foods because vegetables and fruit themselves are not nutrient dense enough to keep you alive. I mean, that right there should be like, okay, we should just stop the subject right now. That's like stupid. Like you can't live unless you eat processed food. Okay, that should be a red flag. But the way I approached it, in the reason I came to the conclusion that I did, and this is important. I'm really glad you asked this question, because when you look at the two things, like nutrition research is all over the place. There's no consensus. But when I look at the direct result of nutrition and what are the things that drive the longest life, there are two things. Two things have been discovered to make you live much longer than the average person. And one is high level of strength, and the second one is low level of body fat. Now, is it the body fat itself? No, there's a lot of different contributing factors, because if you have low body fat, you have great blood flow, you don't have caloric excess, you have a good insulin sensitivity, as opposed to being insensitive to insulin, like a diabetic or somebody who's pre-diabetic. So those are the two biggest indicators that all the other things in the body that count are good. So when I look at if I start at that position, the two things that are going to make us live the longest. Okay, what's the nutrition that's going to give us the highest level of strength and the lowest level of body fat? And that's animal protein. That's not even a confused subject at all. You need a very high level of protein. And then, of course, I developed some other products
next question.
Yeah. Before I developed Fortigen, because it's really the one approach to getting the right amount of protein without having to eat so much. So like, for example, I've been out to dinner with the Osteostrong team, and they'll watch me eat 1.5 kilos of steak. And I can do that, but there's not a lot of people who want to do that. So yeah, it's just not convenient. So I came up with a meal replacement based on bacterial fermentation, which coincidentally is vegan friendly because it's not made out of animals. So fermentation is fermentation. You can get the right fermentation culture via the right bacteria, and it'll grow on lots of different things. So now there is a way for a vegan to not die of malnutrition by using this. So I don't talk about it much because vegans would need to eat a lot of the product that I sell. So it sounds very self-promotional. So it's like, all right, if they discover it, then okay. But they're not eating nutrient dense anything. So they're missing out. But this can help. So that's the only supplement I take. It's called Fortigen.
And we don't have it here in Greece,
I know. I need to figure that out. It's it has to do with
our FDA or something like that.
Yeah. Your sort of medical directives are very different than the United States, and like selling a nutritional supplement has very low standards in the United States. Like, just sort of like if you self-certify that you're not including anything that's toxic in your supplement, they're like, okay. So yeah, it doesn't, like, no one cares. It's just go. So Europe's not like that.
Can I ask you something which interests me most? I want the opportunity to ask you about long distance running. Okay, I perform long distance running. I run marathons, I run ultras, and a big cliche about that is that you need carbs.
Oh yeah, you do.
Is it true? And I mean, you've heard probably about carbo loading protocols before a race. During the race, you have to be carbo loaded. And I was wondering if someone tries a keto diet or something that is based on protein, can he perform at the long distance races or things like that, trails, big trails, 100 miles and things like that?
So the guy I know who hosts a podcast, I've been on that podcast. It's called Human Performance Outliers. His name is Zach Bitters.
Zach
Bitters, ZACHBITTERS.
Mm-hmm.
And he just broke the world record for running 100 miles. And he's a carnivore. All he eats is meat, unless he's running. While he's running, he consumes carbohydrates.
Okay. During the sport, you mean?
Correct.
Not carbo loading before, but during the sport, he eats carbs.
Right. Because your body will still make glycogen for musculature for the start of your race.
Mm-hmm.
But because it'll convert protein into glucose through gluconeogenesis.
Mm-hmm.
But it's only the exact amount you need. So the body has a self-regulatory mechanism for that. So he shows up lighter and leaner to these races because he's more muscular and doesn't hold much body fat. So distance runners hold more body fat than sprinters in general, but not this guy. So he doesn't even look like a distance runner. He looks more like a sprinter. And then as he goes through the race, he's definitely having to use carbohydrates because you need to keep the muscle going. Yeah, broke the 100-mile world record.
Okay, I think one more thing we should say to people is that, okay, perhaps you're having a diet based on fasting or based on the protein protocol or keto or something like that. Okay, you can break it for some days. There is not a penalty. There is not a punishment for that. We are all humans. We make, I don't know if you do cheats on your diet. I think you're very dedicated, but.
No, I don't. Right, I am. But yeah, but I also, I realize like, not everybody's like me. And so I'd rather be more realistic about it. You know, like here's another thing. When it comes to nutritional preferences, men and women are very different. And, you know, like you ask a guy to give up on carbohydrates and he'll go, all right, if I have to, you know, let me try it for 6 months and then I'll let you know. But of the women I've dated that I've suggested, hey, let's not have carbohydrates, that doesn't go well. They're not a fan of that. So, you know, what I end up suggesting, because, you know, you want to have a good relationship, so you never tell them anything. You just suggest. I say like, well, okay, how about we consume carbohydrates after our workout so it gets used as muscle glycogen instead of being stored as body fat. So there are strategies that's I think the best strategy, to where if you want to have some carbohydrates, like you got to earn it first. And within half an hour after a workout, the majority of carbohydrates, as long as you're going 0.5 gram per pound of body weight, I'm not going to do the metric conversion. It's off the top of my head, but there's a certain amount that won't trigger much of an insulin event, a very low level insulin event. And then, you know, you're not storing any body fat. It's just being used for musculature. So that's a way to do it, where you can, I guess you could call it the cheat meal or something. You can do that every day you work out. Every day you use X3 or something like that. So I think that's been helpful.
Okay, let me go to some questions from the audience. X3 is really impressive, says Eleni. What I wanted to ask is, what about cardio? Do you suggest a combination of X3 with another form of exercise, or X3 is enough by itself?
It depends what your goals are. So if your goal, like for you want to be able to run faster and further with a very low level of energy usage. So that is the challenge of the cardiovascular sports. So if your goal is that, you must do that. The only way to get better at running is to run. So if your goal is being as strong as possible and as lean as possible, then cardio is not that great, because there's a chronic upregulation of cortisol. Cortisol has two objectives, or it does two things in the body. It diminishes muscle mass, so it gets rid of muscle, and then it protects body fat, which makes sense. If you want to be an economy car, you want a smaller engine and a bigger gas tank. Gas tank is body fat and engine is musculature. So you're shrinking the engine and increasing the storage. But that's not really what most people want when they go and engage in exercise and they're trying to just look and feel better necessarily. So what I recommend is, like, do cardio if what you want to be great at is cardio. Otherwise, if you just want to be strong and lean, now from a cardiac health perspective, like, we all want a healthy heart. Weight training in general, not just X3, but weight training in general, has been seen to have a greater or equal effect on cardiac health. But there's a myth that got in there. So like I'm a bigger person. Like I said, I'm 113 kilos. And if you and I are running up a couple flights of stairs, let's say we go in an old building and the elevator's broken, we got to run up 10 flights of stairs. You'll probably be fine. You won't even be sweating. I will be covered in sweat and out of breath. Now, when this happens, somebody would say to me, you must not have very good cardiovascular fitness. No, my legs are that big around. And when my quadriceps are contracting and relaxing and contracting and relaxing, they demand more blood. So the heart has to work much harder to move me up the flight of stairs than, let's say, you, who runs distance. So that's the difference. It doesn't mean somebody has poor cardiovascular health because they get out of breath. If they're a strength athlete, what it means is I just have a bigger engine. So, you know, like somebody who's a distance runner is more like a Prius, whereas I'm more like a Formula One car. You wouldn't drive a Formula One car from, you know, Greece to Moscow. Yeah, it's not an efficient vehicle at all.
To me, it's well understand that, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of weightlifters here in Greece are reacting a bit to the price of the X3 because they keep saying things like they can find elastic bands in lower prices and why the X3 is so expensive. What's your answer to that?
These are all things that people say who have never used it. So the power in the banding is anywhere from 10 to 50 times or 100 times greater than what you would find with other sort of TheraBand or rehab bands. So the bands that are available out there are generally for rehabilitation. You know, like you hook it to a piece of equipment and then you do outward rotation kind of thing. So you're exercising some very small muscles in the shoulder. That's a physiotherapy type thing. Mm-hmm. But for strength, there's no getting away from heavy. You need heavy. And so like when I do my chest press, I'm using 230 kilos at the top, and I might do that for 20 repetitions. And so the bar has to be made of a quality that, you know, it's not going to break. So this is solid steel inside. And then you can see as I rotate the bar, the hooks stay even, like they stay parallel to the ground. So the solid steel core, and then this is anodized aluminum, and this is not going to wear out. It's going to look beautiful. It's the kind of thing you can, you know, you're going to keep around for forever. That'll look beautiful after I'm an old man and gone. So it's designed very well, and it has to be, because the research shows that humans are 7 times stronger in the stronger range of motion than they are in the weaker range of motion. So we use much heavier weight with that thing than you would ever use in the gym. So it needs to be designed accordingly. So it's much more powerful than a regular Olympic bar. And you know, when somebody looks at a picture and spends 10 seconds coming up with a judgment, okay, I mean, they just don't know what they're talking about.
So the big issue really is to try it on. I can say for myself, yes, it's totally different. Mm-hmm. One question that relates the things we've said before: writing a book, is cardio, is long distance, what it is? And especially your book with this provocative title, that weightlifting is a waste of time. Can you say a bit more? Okay, the first book was your research about a specific method about Osteostrong, was science, very much of science. And I think this book is more about experience, of course, science again, but it's also your personal experience. So it's a long distance thing. What is more difficult, to do X3 10 minutes a day or to write a book about it?
I think writing a book is one of the most difficult things, period. Yeah, because you gotta think about every word, every sentence, every paragraph, and what's it really doing there? What's the message? Especially when it's both a story and a scientific documentation exercise. Because I wanted a place where everybody could get all of the science. So there's 250 studies referenced in there. And yeah, I was going to give everybody all the detail. I even had to cut some stuff out of it. That happens, you know, because I wander off in another direction. You know, like going into detail of cardiac axis of like hypoxia, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, there's probably like 20 people in the world that would know what I'm talking about. And, you know, the average reader is like, why do I need to know this? So, but it's still important documentation in relation to how the product works and why it works. But it's like, you know, not a lot of people think about cardiac hypoxia and using constant tension and variable resistance together to keep blood away from the heart, so the heart sees a deficit in muscle, like, and then thereby adjusts myostatin levels. Like everything I just said right there, that would be fascinating to somebody who knows what those words mean. That doesn't mean anything to the typical person. It means you're going to grow muscle a lot faster. But, you know, I can just say that, right?
Yes, but on the other hand, books that give you the spark to search more and to find documentation about the sayings. And okay, I think if you buy a book that has this specific title, you don't suppose that you're going to read the story only. There's a work to be done in order to understand.
Mm-hmm.
This is why you're buying it to the first place, you know.
Sure.
So I have a very, I don't know, financial question, how the book is going. It is already bestseller. What the reaction of the community of the weightlifters or non-weightlifters? How is now the X3 in the USA? Do teams are using it? Professional athletes? I don't know. What can you say?
Many. Yeah. There's about 30 individual athletes and one entire professional team, the Miami Heat basketball team. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of professional athletes are using it, and they've not agreed to let me use their image. Mm-hmm. So like some of the best NFL players and basketball players are using the product. One of them I had a conversation with, and he said, you can use my image if you give me half of your company. And I was just like, yeah, you're not worth that much. And that guy's one of the best guys to ever play football. I was like, no, go ahead. I don't need you.
Yes, but this takes us back to the beginning of the conversation about nutrition also, that it's also here a commercial thing. There are sponsors, there are things like that cannot be bypassed. Okay, there's another audience question which will take us back to where it all began with Osteostrong. And what's the difference between physiotherapy and Osteostrong?
There's no intervention at any physiotherapy location that's going to do anything close to what Osteostrong does. Like there's nothing that'll be this similar. And most weighted type movements are maybe 1 or 2 kilos, whereas we're using 300, 400 kilos to trigger bone growth. Doesn't mean it hurts. It doesn't hurt at all. It's just very specific for what it does. And nothing done in a physiotherapy clinic is anything like this.
Okay, I have a last question for you. Can you tell us your score in each of the 4 spectrum?
Sure.
Yes. In kilos,
Yeah.
because here in Greece we have.
All right. Let me do some math here. So
impressive.
It's.
I mean, if I manage to do 1,100 kilos in leg press, imagine.
So my chest press is 909 kilos.
Wow.
1,590 kilos is my legs. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
My hip, my lower extremity. Let's see. 272 is my core. And 681 is my spine.
Okay. Is it okay to perform the spectrum after breaking a bone?
As long as it's set and you're cleared by your physician to do exercise, to do strength type exercise.
Mm-hmm.
So, like we're not going to get in the way. Also depends on the fracture. It's up to the surgeon. Like we don't ever tell people when. It's every break is different. So it's got to be up to the person who's set the bone and understands what's going on. Yeah.
Okay. The two methods are helping each other. If you use X3, you can improve your results to Osteostrong, for example.
Yeah, they're synergistic. So the stronger the bone mass, the more muscle you can put on that frame. So the frame is weak, your body has neural inhibitory processes to keep you from engaging muscle, which could cause a fracture. Like, think about it this way. You can't squeeze a fist hard enough to break your own finger, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, somebody who's elderly or something, if they get their finger caught, it can break very easily. They're walking down a flight of stairs and they hook their finger on a railing or something and they can snap their finger and, they have a fracture. So you can't break your own bone yourself under your own, putting power on your own bone mass, but other things that are abrupt can do that. So that's because, like, if the body knows that the frame, the skeleton is weak, it's not going to allow for much of a contraction because it doesn't want to cause a fracture in itself. But the stronger the bone mass becomes, the greater engagement of musculature you can have, and thereby the greater muscular growth. So there's a very strong relationship between the two.
Okay. How much time do you have to perform the spectrum to see results?
Oh, you see results in the force you produce. You see that within a week. Now, that's a functional performance of bone. And then to see it in like the medical imaging, you might want to wait 6 months because that growth and that mineralization they're not very accurate reads. A DEXA is the best thing we have. Well, actually a blood test of markers, bone building and bone breakdown markers is the best, but those are kind of new. And so a lot of GPs don't know how to read those, and they're not easy to read. So it's not like they don't care. You really have to take a course on understanding that blood work for the bone marker. So, but if you look at the reason I brought it up is DEXA is not a very accurate measure. And if you don't have, they say you need to use the same exact DEXA machine, not the same manufacturer, but the same one. And then you need to have the same technician because every technician lines people up a little differently. So right there is like, okay, is this an art or is this a science? So like
to have increases in several parts and decreases in others,
right?
While using the method, and if you don't see results in 6 months, in 1 year, which are the factors that you have to examine to find the answer? What is the
right.
thing you may be doing wrong, or, you know?
Right. The forces may not be high enough. You could have inflammation that's keeping you from growing, keeping you from repairing your bone mass. So high level of inflammatories. This is why there's just a meta-analysis published about vegans and bone density. 20 different studies have now found that veganism is very damaging to bone. So you lose bone mass very quickly because you're constantly inflamed. You're full of oxalates, and you can't, anabolic processes are all brought to a stop. You can't regenerate cells, brain function suffers, and you know, probably most importantly for long life, bone density suffers, and we need to stop all that. So nutritional, there's also medications that are damaging to bone. Proton pump inhibitors, which are like heartburn medication. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I don't know what the Greek way of referring to that would be, but those are very damaging to bone density. Smoking is damaging to bone density.
Alcohol also.
Alcohol, yeah, for sure. It's inflammatory, so yeah, same thing.
And okay, one last question is the link between good health and with good bone health. We are reading now studies that indicate and prove that having a healthy bone system is essential to having a good health. And all this knowledge that arises now after all these years that they were simply telling us drink some milk before you go to bed, or
right,
you know, things like that.
Does nothing. Right. Yeah. It makes logical sense. Also, everything in your body is there because of the structure of your body. Right. Like we're not jellyfish. We have bone structure, and the stronger that structure is, the more those organs, those muscles can handle it. And why not be your best? You'll feel better.
All organs are attached to this system, so you have to nourish it. You know, it's important.
Absolutely. Yeah, right. If you go to plant a garden in sand, you're not going to get very good vegetables. Right? You got to have the right soil there.
What's your best memory from Greece?
There are a lot of restaurants I liked. Everyone was so friendly, and I stayed at a hotel where I had a view of the Parthenon. That's beautiful. It's, you know, where like democracy and human history started, like right there. That's cool. I really love that about Greece. And of course the weather was great, and weather's always great in Greece. So
an incredible picture of you doing X3 with the Parthenon
in the background. Yeah, those are some of my favorite pictures I've ever taken.
People don't believe it. To be honest, most of people don't think it's real.
Right? They're like, where were you standing where you had that view? Yeah, it's the King George Hotel. Yeah. So also, that was not my balcony. I went to the restaurant's balcony and just started doing the X3. And of course, you know, like the staff is like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm sorry. I'm just going to keep doing this. Just 10 minutes. And so everyone's eating and then watching me. It was totally disruptive.
Okay, we should find people to testify that it was a true image.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so like some of the people were watching me and like being fascinated of what I was doing. Like, what is he doing? Like, that looks like a really hard workout, but he carried all that stuff in a small bag. And so they're like, and then other people were just like furious that I was like exercising while they were eating, like right now. But I didn't care. I'm American. We seem to not care who we offend. So I'm just like, I'm just going to do what I do. And, you know, if you have a problem with it, that's your problem, not my problem.
Yes. There's not a law breaking there.
Right.
It's outside.
Right.
Okay. I wish you come back soon, which will mean that the situation is going to be much better with all that thing that happens now worldwide. And we get to see you here in Greece and visit the good restaurants and do X3 and
it'd be wonderful.
Thank you.
Perfect.